I'm King Link and it's the third week of February. I know it's a little late, but let's do the Game Pass February 2022 review. We have 17 titles this month, including a brand new platform. 2 of these games came on Ubisoft Connect, their service. I believe you only get 2 games on that right now, and you have to use their launcher, and if that's a deal breaker, there's enough other games to look at. Now, there were some issues this month, and I'll talk about them at the end, but in general, it's another large month with a ton of games. Technically, Game Pass also included Peggle Knights and Battlefield Bad Company 2 this month on EA Play. Those games are over a decade old. I mean, I enjoyed Peggle a decade and a half ago, and Battlefield Bad Company 2 is popular. That's really all the coverage they deserve. So as always, I played about 2 to 3 hours on each title, and I'll tell you what I think. Let's get started with either a throwback or maybe a remaster. I don't know how they're really positioning this one. Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc Anniversary Edition. A dark high school version of Ace Attorney. Danganronpa is an excellent visual novel with a decent amount of gameplay. Players are trapped in a school, and that school has one way out. A student has to kill another and get away with a murder. From there, characters are knocked off, but the majority of the game is split between getting to know your fellow classmates and then trials in an Ace Attorney style. It's a compelling idea, and if you like darker content, this is great. But not everything is great here. The first minor issue is that the Anniversary Edition is pretty much the same game as the original, with a small amount of unnecessary bonus content. I also have to say I have some reservations about the end of the game's story, but at the same time I still gave this the best of the year for its story and its sequel in 2018, which tells you I was able to forgive it. Pick this up if you want dark stories about high schoolers who die and kill each other. There's a great style and atmosphere to this, and the stories are twisted without going too far. The puzzles at the core of the game are good, though sometimes annoying, but I still very much enjoyed this title. Nobody Saves the World. Quests. Quests everywhere. Nobody Saves the World is an adventure game where the player gets the magic ability to change forms between multiple characters, and you, as the nobody in the title, have to save the world. There's an interesting artistic style here, and while I don't really love the main character's form, the rest look really good. There's solid writing and gameplay as well. This is a game that builds up over time. In the beginning, you only have a few forms, but will eventually earn more by completing quests, and dear God, Nobody Saves the World is quest central. Areas in this game have quests, the forms you have quests to level up, dungeons have quests, and each will slowly level up various parts of your character. Eventually, you get the ability to mix and match your skills and intrinsic abilities between these different classes or forms. There's just a lot here. My only issue so far is that the enemies level up with you, which means you can't come back later and stomp hard dungeons, but in general, this is a very solid title. Pick this up if you're a completionist or love quests. I'm not kidding when I say this game is quest heavy, but I love that part of the game, and the fact that this is how you level up and gain power makes this fun and rewarding to chase after all these small goals. There's also a solidly written, humorous story here, which is worth playing through. The Hitman Trilogy. Not 1, not 2, but all 3 titles from a fantastic series. Hitman follows Agent 47 as he tries to take down targets with stealth and skill, or just goes on a murder spree, whichever the player decides to go with. While the original games in the series were mostly linear stealth games, Hitman in 2016 changed up the formula to make a puzzle box idea where players could assassinate targets in almost any way, with the game tracking and rewarding many different beats and challenges, which in turn unlocks even more tools to help Agent 47 in other maps. The puzzle box approach is solid, it makes levels infinitely replayable, and the rules of the game are heavily in the player's favor. The way the game is laid out gives numerous opportunities to players, and if players need even more help, there's guided stories that show players how to approach each level, but also players can avoid using those and get an immersive experience. Each of these games has only about 6 levels, but players will want to play each level multiple times. I've spent about 20 hours per title, and even bought Hitman 3 on Steam to support the devs, and because I wanted it in my library. There is also Hitman VR, which I got a little time with, and appears to be on all 3 PC platforms now, Epic, Microsoft, and Steam. It's just part of the game's executable. That's also included, and it felt very good. However, Oculus stopped recognizing my Rift headset, so I can't talk too much about it, but it's definitely worth a look. Pick this up if you like puzzles, stealth games, or immersive worlds. This was a unique and fresh take on the series, and I gave the second title one of my games of the year for 2020. Hitman 1 and Hitman 3 are both of the same high quality and worth checking out. I recommend this to anyone who hasn't already tried out these games. They're very unique, and I will be finishing Hitman 3. I've waited a whole year for that one to release on Steam. Death's Door. Don't say Dark Souls. Don't say Dark Souls. Death's Door is like Dark Souls. Damn. But in all honesty, Death's Door is an easier version of Dark Souls. It takes much of what everyone enjoys about that genre, the exploration, the challenge, and the great character designs. There's now an isometric view instead of a third-person view, and players don't lose their souls when they die. There's also a very interesting health system that replaces the Estus Flask, but still retains the limited health system there, and all of this feels very good. But all those changes make the game a bit easier, and so people who want those ultra-hard games might be disappointed. A few bosses I was actually able to beat on a single attempt, while there were arenas that actually took me far too many tries like the one you're seeing. There's still the long trek back if you fail, but at the same time, it doesn't feel as punishing on each of these failures either. Pick this up if you enjoy challenging games but are willing to have a more welcoming experience. This is perfect for fans who don't like the Souls-like genre for their difficulty, but I also think it appeals to Souls-like fans as well. It just won't be for everyone, but I think the art style is good, the gameplay is enjoyable, and the level design is well done. Windjammers 2. Reviving a Neo Geo game, but I have to ask, why? Windjammers is a new version of a classic arcade and Neo Geo CD title. In it, players fling a disc back and forth and score points when the opponent is unable to grab it. There are multiple arenas, each with different scoring systems and potential hazards in the way. Players have to move their characters around the court and can even use power shots. But beyond that, Windjammer lacks anything deeper than what the classic game offers. Windjammers has enough of a following to have been played at EVO, a fighting game tournament, and I suppose that makes sense for a reason to make a sequel to an 18-year-old game now. But this feels like a game that could have just been made 18 years ago, albeit with better graphics, and that's fine, but it's not exactly an exciting title. I did find the online modes to be better, as the AI is very powerful and a human player is easier to trick, but in general, I don't think I get this game outside of competitive play and see no reason to return. Pick this up if you want to join the Windjammer League. It's not a bad game, and I absolutely understand why it would be at EVO, but the arcade modes is decently hard with limited continues, and in general, the gameplay is limited. It's going to appeal to people who want to play professionally, and that's about it. Pupperazzi. Look at the cute doggy. Pupperazzi is exactly what it sounds like. You take pictures of dogs and get rewarded for it, and that's perfect. The main character is a giant camera, and check the shadow, I'm not making that up, you can even take selfies. On each level, there are multiple challenges of specific shots the game wants players to take, and players can upload their shots to social media to try to earn followers, which happens on every shot. There's no real penalty or negatives here, it's just take pictures of doggies, or take specific pictures of doggies, and enjoy the experience. And yet, okay, there is a few issues here. First off, the game is short. You probably could speedrun the main story in under an hour if you tried, though there is a lot of content even after finishing the game, but after 3 to 4 hours you probably have almost everything, including all the achievements. There's also glitches, such as the one that kept happening where the screen's color got blown out, and then I couldn't quit the level or the game without hitting Alt F4, and that actually happened multiple times. Though the team does appear to be working on patches on all platforms, hopefully it's fixed by now. Also, this is a very focused game. If you don't like the idea of taking pictures of dogs, there's not much else here, but that's also a strength. Pick this up if you like taking pictures of dogs. I mean, I've said it multiple times. This is not a deep game, but it's one that I enjoyed playing and gladly recommend to others. I like the idea of a simple concept well executed, and while the issues do bother me, it didn't stop me from continually playing the game. I enjoyed myself here, but again, I like taking pictures of dogs. Tom Clancy Rainbow Six Siege Deluxe Edition, 5-on-5 Tactical Combat. Rainbow Six Siege is the hardcore tactical shooter that feels like a class-based version of Counter-Strike. If you played this, you know what I'm talking about, but if not, it's set up where one team defends 2 bombs and the other team tries to defuse them or kill their opponents. It's the best of 5 matches with teams switching sides and may the best team win, which was usually not my team. I played 6 matches and my team never won a single point. I'll take full blame for that, I did nothing. This is a pretty solid game though, and I like the tactical nature of it, but this is also 7 years old, so there's a lot of meta, classes, characters, tactics, and a ton more to learn. There's a lot here, and apparently it changes quite often, which can be both a positive and a negative depending on how you like your multiplayer games. There's also a ton of microtransactions. You know, it's at the level that I don't understand why this game isn't free to play, but there's now levels of microtransactions that put Gears 5 to shame. It's a bit much as this is meant to be a paid title, and since it's Ubisoft, there's of course boosters. Not everything can be bought by in-game currency either. I just don't know. Players beware. Pick this up if you like tactical gameplay. I used to be a fan of Rainbow Six, at least in the single player days, but this one was hard for me. I could be talked into playing this again, but I think I'm just going to leave that for real fans, and this is still decently popular. There are at least 50,000 people playing on Steam every day, and I'm sure many more on Ubisoft and other platforms as well, so it's still worth checking out. If you have a squad, you'll have a better time, but even without one, it's worth a try. You just better hope I'm playing on the other team. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Extraction. Are horde shooters the new roguelites? Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Extraction takes the gameplay of Rainbow Six Siege, which we just talked about, and makes it players versus hordes of monsters while trying to retain the tactical feel. Players need to accomplish up to 3 goals on each map and extract. There are some clever and interesting ideas in this game, such as using different characters, or if a player dies, they lose access to their current character until they rescue them. There's also this idea that characters are injured over time and need to rest up, which means players will have to use other individuals. But for every good idea Rainbow Six Extraction is, this is just an average game going through the motions. There's a weak story, enemies that don't feel special, and gameplay that's repetitive, and I'm talking after only a few minutes. While there are difficulties and reasons to keep playing, it suffers from not standing out from the competition. This is a horde shooter, but there's a lot of competition in this space, and I'd probably just play Outriders or Back 4 Blood before this one. Honestly, as a fan of Rainbow Six Vegas, this one hurts because it's so average. Pick this up if you're a fan of Rainbow Six Siege and you want to play with those characters. This is going to be the best PvE experience you can get, but otherwise, I would just play something else. I just don't think it's a very interesting game. Also, it's Ubisoft, so before long, there's going to be a lot of microtransactions. That's just their full MO now. Taiko no Tatsunju, the Drum Master. Drumming through the night. Taiko no Tatsunju is a game where you can simulate playing a taiko drum, which is a traditional Japanese instrument. If you haven't seen someone play them, check out YouTube, they are awesome instruments. At the same time, this is a mixed bag. If you want to play with the controller, you can, but you're not going to get that authentic experience. However, I found it enjoyable. If you do have a taiko controller, even from a different console, you already know what this is about, and it's a great addition to the franchise. I believe PC can use almost any taiko controller with the right converters as well. The music here is excellent and well chosen. There are several Bandai Namco properties, classic music, and even Japanese pop songs. There are a couple songs from Undertale, which is a great choice, and I think that's the only American property I saw. At the same time, this is just a rhythm game, and while it's a lot of fun to play, it's a strange one, especially if fans are used to Guitar Hero or DDR. But as a fan of the series, this feels like an authentic entry, rather than one geared towards an American audience. You can take that however you like. Pick this up if you like rhythm games. Playing with the controller is a little weaker, but I still had a weird blast playing this franchise and enjoy this music. If you want the authentic experience, be prepared because last I checked, the drums for this for USB is like in the $90 range, though maybe there are cheaper options somewhere. Dreamscraper. I keep calling this game Dreamscraper for some reason. Oops. Dreamscraper feels like someone had a checklist. Combat like Hades? Check. Binding of Isaac style map? Check. And art design based on dreams? Check. Many companies would take that list and ruin the idea by thinking it was complete on its own, but Dreamscraper pushes past all that and delivers a fantastic roguelite that should be checked out. I love the item descriptions that touch on pop culture, like referencing Donatello when talking about a pool cue weapon, and I dare any 80s kid to deny they ever did that. But Dreamscraper had problems, with the past tense being stressed there. I lost about 2 hours of a save file and was so pissed at this game, but a patch has come out and I believe that issue is now resolved, which is good. The game itself is also pretty hard. The first area is more like a tutorial, and the second area continues to kick my butt to this day, though there are upgrades that can make it easier and an easy mode that I may end up using. Pick this up if you like roguelites. Yes, this game is quite similar to both Binding of Isaac and Hades, and those games are better, but I do still like this one, and I want to get back to it and do a deeper dive. It's one of the reasons I was so absolutely frustrated when I lost my save file, because I was enchanted by this game, and I've gone back and played more, and, you know, it is still worthy of my time. Telling Lies, an FMV mystery. Telling Lies is the follow-up to Her Story. It's once again made by Sam Barlow, but it is a larger, more complex story, and in it you follow the life of David Smith in a series of calls he makes to multiple people. Players have to find both halves of the same call and then watch them and try to piece the narrative together. The game is well acted and looks great and has an interesting gameplay style that is uniquely similar to Her Story. But not everything works here. Because you're seeing only two halves of a long video call, you can't match up the conversation and recreate it because you can't see them both at the same time, you only see one person's view. In addition, the story comes together pretty early on. I think I understood the whole story about a third of the way through the game, so there was a ton of extra footage that I had to find to be a completionist. But the concept works and it's a unique idea. Pick this up if you want to play something different. This is not your usual game and it is a completely story-driven experience. The fact you're searching a database of clips based on what is being said is well done, and it forces the player to think about how to find the other side of a conversation, but it struggles to stick that landing where her story still has me considering different possibilities almost a half a decade later. I gave this an 8 out of 10 when I originally played it, and it deserves that. Besiege. Let's go blow up a kingdom one building at a time. Besiege allows players to build war machines and use those machines to take on a variety of tasks, mostly blowing up a specific target, killing many enemies, or moving through a level with or without additional objectives. If you're a fan of bridge builders or similar games, Besiege will feel right at home for you. But the building aspect is pretty strong with Besiege, and every level feels like it needs a unique build, and while it is fun to come up with something that might work, after about 20 levels, I felt like taking a break. I'm not that creative on this stuff, and while there is mod support through mod.io, I feel like that's cheating. Still, the idea and concepts are fun here, and if you like building things, this will scratch that itch. Pick this up if you like to build machines of death. This is a rather solid title, and I found myself interested in seeing what the game would have me develop next, and while I did bounce a little bit early, it wasn't an issue with the game. I just wasn't enjoying designing completely brand new vehicles at every level, but what I saw here is worth playing, and if you want a solid challenge, there's a lot of interesting pieces here. Skul the Hero Slayer. Swapping heads like people swap hats. Skul the Hero Slayer is a roguelite where you take on the role of a skeleton fighting against the invading heroes to beat them back and drive them out of your land. Our skeleton hero can swap out his skull for other skulls that give them another class's skills and abilities. It's a clever idea and a great design that works. The first bosses give a reasonable challenge. Unfortunately, that might be all I can say. You see, there's a bad bug specifically for the Game Pass version. Every so often you get a black screen in a room. Not a black room, but you lose all visuals, you can't even see the menu, and while you can quit and restart runs, this happened 3 times to me, not counting the time that it happened on boot up. I thought it might be something with my system, but a lot of people are reporting it and complaining on Microsoft's reviews, as they should. This is a year-old game on PC, and it only has this on Game Pass. The developers are South Korean, but I did try to reach out to them on Discord and Steam's forums, and no response was given. It's been over a week and there have been 2 patches, neither appear to even address this. Don't pick this up yet, at least not on Game Pass. What's annoying me is I was having a really great time with this and I wanted to see how the difficulty scaled, which I heard can be pretty hard, but losing runs and being forced to restart after about 15 minutes because the game is broken ruins that experience. I think I'm just going to play Dreamscraper for now to get my roguelite fix. Hopefully this gets fixed in the future. Edge of Eternity. What if Final Fantasy was kickstarted by an indie team? Edge of Eternity is unique. It's a game that took on the size and scope of a Final Fantasy game that was kickstarted successfully 7 years ago and was released episodically. This is a 40-plus hour game from what I understand was a team of 13 and potentially still is. Just on those stats alone, Edge of Eternity is interesting. The final result, though, I'm not sure about. The game is quite inconsistent, which makes sense when it was released over 3 years in chapter form. The story is a mixed bag, and the early graphics are dated. My big issue, though, is the opening chapters. The characters have awkward emotions, but worse, when the game left early access about 7 months ago, it had scenes that made sense. The developers actually took them out to make the tutorial flow better, but the story suffered for that. I even just noticed how bad it felt. And that meant, even after launching, the game is still being patched. There's a lot of promise post-DLC launch as well, so I see this game continuing to evolve, which for a JRPG really isn't what I want. But I still think this is a unicorn. It's a small team attempting to deliver a Final Fantasy scaled project. That's a huge undertaking. Of course, there are going to be bugs and issues with it, but I also can't deny I'm utterly fascinated with this and may even return just to see more. As I wrote this, I actually found out that the developers were French, which was not even something I was considering, either American or Japanese. It's a very strange and unique title. Pick this up if you're as curious about it as I am. If you like turn-based JRPGs, you can do worse. I'm not a fan here, but I also have considered playing more because, admittedly, I'm playing the oldest parts of the game, and people do say this one gets better over time. It just has a very rough opening. The Last Kids on Earth and the Staff of Doom. A kid's cartoon with a great design. The Last Kids on Earth is a cartoon on Netflix based on a book of the same name. I really don't know much more about it, though the cast has some major names like Mark Hamill. The Last Kids on Earth and the Staff of Doom is an action RPG with a bunch of open world elements and takes on an extremely clever design of the cartoons and books. Almost every non-human character is visually interesting and unique, and that's pretty impressive. As a game, this is merely okay. There is couch co-op, but when playing alone, there was a lot of repetition. The bosses and characters here are great, but the average hordes of enemies are just nameless zombies. The collectibles in the overworld just respawn, and while there is a crafting system and inventory as well as a tower defense mode, yeah, this game has way too many modes. But all those modes don't really change the game too much. However, the game did get me interested in the series, which I may watch on Netflix once I'm done rewatching the Marvel shows there, and maybe that will make me want to play the game more. Pick this up if you already know the show or have someone you want to play with. This isn't a bad game, it's just nothing that stood out on its own and probably would mean a lot more if I was already familiar with the television show, but the character designs definitely have me curious. Ark Survival Evolved. Dinosaurs! As I play Ark, I was transported back to when I started Minecraft and had to learn everything about the game from a third party. Back then it was a wiki. There's no real tutorial or getting started. You're dropped in a world, told it's a tutorial, and then left to your own devices. Not exactly a friendly beginning, and can be made worse because on one of the 4 servers I played, I was unable to stay alive for like more than 30 seconds because the enemies just kept eating me no matter where I respawned. Ark is a game that you're going to have to learn, and while it's cool to be able to say you can tame dinosaurs and ride them, the opening hours here are brutal. Going on Discord, I found out I could go on to Gen 2 worlds instead of Gen 1, and I had the opposite problem. I became a Superman where almost nothing could affect me, as I was given super strong armor and a chance to survive, but still no tutorials. With this game in its 7th year now, that's a bit disappointing. The art here is good, the world and animal designs are worth checking out, but the learning curve is steep. So steep I think a lot of people fall off. I know I probably have, unfortunately. Pick this up if you like the survival genre, but I would recommend finding a community to join or a mentor to take you through those early patches, because I'm not kidding. Even in 2022, this game is brutal to start, but also there's a lot here worth checking out, including unofficial servers with mods. At least one company still believes that players can play the game as they want. Kudos to the team for that. Infernax. This is how to do a retro game. Infernax makes it pretty clear where it gets its influences from. It's a mixture of Castlevania, particularly Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, with a touch of Zelda 2 as well, but it's done in such a way that the player doesn't need to have played those original titles. Instead, this is a great classic adventure game with improved controls and an interesting layout, and rather major changes that only benefit the game. Infernax revolves around the player gaining 5 crystals from 5 different bosses in relatively difficult areas. Players can explore a decent amount of the map without upgrades and will be able to level up their character as the game goes on, but never really gets rid of the challenge. I actually spent a lot of time in a single dungeon, and while I struggled, I never felt that it was unfair, but rather I had made mistakes. Players are killed after only a couple hits, but that only adds to the experience. Pick this up if you like retro games or love those old NES titles. Again, this does a fantastic job of modernizing them without completely imitating the original games or making the game exclusively for fans of those original games. Though it does have very strong influences which are better if you have that history with the games that it's based on. Particularly if you come to a cliff and kneel down for 10 seconds, well, just try it. And that's what I have for February. Now let's deal with the elephant in the room. This month was rough. 4 titles didn't feel ready for the service. Dreamscapers lost 2 hours of my data. Pupperazzi kept soft crashing on me, requiring me to hit Alt F4. Skul the Hero Slayer is still unplayable in my opinion, and Edge of Eternity has a bunch of glitches. People will say, oh, that's just how launch titles are, and I really hate that mentality because it absolves these companies of just general testing. But only Pupperazzi launched in the last month. The rest have been out on PC for at least a half a year or more in most cases. Some people will say, well, the Xbox is a new platform even on PC, and while there is a small amount of truth there due to integrating with the Xbox profile and achievements, these bugs should have been caught before now. I mean, Skul is being hammered on the reviews because of these issues. I just hate the fact that it feels like no one at Microsoft even tested these games because they should have noticed some of these issues. I've talked about in the past with how Kill It With Fire was a year-old build. Record of Lotus War had a better version on Steam as well. I hope Microsoft will start spending a little bit of time testing these games since they are spending the time and money promoting them as new additions to the service, or otherwise say they're in beta or early access if they're this rough. This was also generally a weak month. I know people are going to do backflips about Rainbow Six Extraction or Rainbow Six Siege being major games, and they are, but it just wasn't a very good one. There were very few standout titles from the AAA space. Hitman was probably the only one I'd count, but the indies filled in the vacancies as indies do. Getting some Ubisoft titles is a mixed bag. On PC, you have to get the Ubisoft launcher to play them, but I don't believe they gave players Ubisoft Plus just those 2 games, which is a shame that I have to download a whole other launcher for just them. And I realize this is the first month after New Year's. It was always going to be a little bit slower, and next month already looks different. But before we get into that, like always, I found 5 games I think are worthy of checking out. Let's go through them. The 5th strongest of this month is a personal favorite. It's Pupperazzi. This is a very lighthearted game, and the graphics might not appeal to everyone, but I found it rather cute, and it's a game that doesn't overstay its welcome. If you like what you've seen here, this is easily worth a full playthrough. The 4th strongest game of the month is Infernax. I love the retro aesthetic here, and I feel this is a great game for fans of challenging games or that classic feel. But what I really enjoyed here is how much this game works outside of that. I've played enough retro games where the whole point of them was to remind players of a specific game or a genre, and it lacked anything new. Infernax feels like a great game on its own, and it's one I want to return to. The 3rd strongest game of the month is Nobody Saves the World. Ignoring the strange name, this is an achievement lover's dream. Just a ton of quests and many tasks to do. There's a solid game at the core here, but I will always love a game that can tie its quest system directly into its progression system and make a satisfying gameplay loop, and Nobody Saves the World succeeds at that. The 2nd strongest game of this month is Dreamscapers. I love Hades, I love Binding of Isaac, and I love the idea of dreamscapes, and this game has all of that and more. It's created by 3 developers, at least that's what they say, but feels like a major accomplishment for any size team. It's so good I returned once they fixed that big issue that I had, and I'm excited to keep returning. The game does get harder after the first chapter, but I know even if I can't hang on, there's still that easy mode just in case. And finally, the strongest of this month is Hitman 3 or Hitman Trilogy. I bought this game on Steam even though I got it here for free. I just wanted to own it and support IO Interactive. There is a bit of a price issue on its release on Steam, but this is a discussion only of Game Pass. Seeing as you get all 3 games at once, there's a wealth of content and each game here shines. I love the level design, the gameplay, and every so often the cheesy lines are great. The 3rd game has some of the most innovative gameplay for good or bad, but this is one players should not skip. I personally didn't really like the original Hitman games, but this trilogy made me fall in love with the series, and I hope they can continue it in some way. And that's what I have for this month. Now looking at what's coming up in the next 2 weeks, February is kind of a dumping ground for any game that misses the holiday season, and some massive titles are coming up, but for Game Pass, it's a little light. I've already covered Mass Effect and Lawn Mowing Simulator, so if you want to see those, check my back catalog. I will say I'm excited to see Total War Warhammer 3, even though I have kind of struggled a bit with the series before now, and Madden is interesting. Go Pats. Let's take a quick look at what's leaving. I'll be honest, I don't know either of these games, but if you want to play Luna Knights or Hypnospace Outlaw, get to it now. Thanks for watching this. Now, this has been a fun month with a ton of games. I'm really enjoying this series. I hope you are too. Let me know which games sound interesting or that I should focus on in the future, or if there's any titles you're currently playing through. I love talking about this stuff. If you want to talk about more games, check out the Discord link in the description, and of course, consider subscribing and ringing that bell if you're new here. I'm going to be popping up my previous Game Pass video and my most recent Humble Choice where they are including Borderlands 3. See you next time.